Today is 28th of September in 2015. Karelia and I are here together with Shane, also known as the Ruiner. We've had the pleasure to get to know him in a series of ongoing conversations over the past several months. And today he's graciously agreed to allow us to record this conversation. As is conversation, this isn't going to follow the typical interview pattern of question, answer. We're just going to jump right in where we started recording. And thank you, Shane, and thank you for Karelia for making this happen, because I believe what's going to be presented here for anybody that listens is vital information. I found what you just said to be so vital. You know, so much focus being on what you said. How did you describe it? That you weren't really blowing the whistle on anything?
Yeah, I'm not exposing anything. All I'm doing is connecting dots and showing people why it all works so well together. And,
right.
That was the intention of it wasn't meant for the public to learn information. It was meant to help people who kind of knew the information connect the dots between it so that they could understand how it all worked and why the compartmentalization is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know how many times people need to actually hear that to really understand it.
Yeah, like I get a lot of, attempted debunking because people are like, no, we know that the Illuminati works this way. Well, that's what they've told you. That's that's what you've been allowed to know so far. You don't understand that it's a lot deeper than what we have in the public says so far. Mm-hmm. All of these black projects and everything else involved, that from the Vatican to the military industrial complex, it's all connected. It's all part of the same entity. And it was all controlled by the same beings and is now all in the hands of AI.
Well, that brings us back to what we were previously speaking about. Yeah. And it seems to be something that people really need to really wrap their minds around, because most people, from my own observation, still live with compartmentalized brains.
Yep.
And they think that you should have all the answers because you're an Illuminati insider. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit, because even the questions we were given, they are like asking you things that I was wondering, would we expect you to know everything?
Well, that's just it. And I was hoping that people would take that from the writing, that nobody knows everything. Like all of the people within that group, they may have information that the public doesn't, but it's still just as compartmentalized as the information that is in the public. It doesn't mean that they know everything about everything, that's why we have insiders come out and give, contradictory information, is because that's what they've been told. It's not that either one of them is wrong, it's that they're both wrong. It's
right, or they're both incomplete.
Exactly, that they're both incomplete or they're both right about different things, and no one group or one cult or one program or one project within the Illuminati knows everything about the entire structure. And even from the view that I have, it may be a view that allows me to see how it all works together, like cogs in a machine. But it doesn't mean that I know the details of every different belief system that they have or every different historical teaching that they keep. What I do realize is that they're all different. Like if you go from cult A to cult B, you can listen to, the creation myth in two different versions. Mm-hmm. And, you go to cult C and you're going to hear a third version. And then you go over to the military industrial complex and you get into like a program there and you're going to hear a fourth version and a fifth version and a sixth version. And it's almost like these versions of everything are infinite, because they're all kind of symbolic of the structure. They're all symbolic of this pyramid that they built, starting with the Draco down to the parents, and then all of that being kind of corrupted or overtaken by the AI, which may have been the design all along. And then we kind of run into who do we blame for that? Is it the Draco that we blame for that, or is it the AI that we blame for that? Well, maybe we blame them both. or maybe we don't blame either. We just look at it as a problem that we can solve.
So
That's why I'm kind of stuck with this. What happens when we've got nothing left to blame? Well, the only thing left then is taking personal responsibility for our situation. And we can do that now. We can do that now while the other work is being done to overthrow the control.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty common sense person when it comes down to it, the way I tend to resolve problems. So just to go back with what you said, you're speaking of, if there was a being on the planet that could see the whole Illuminati structure, you would have to have an extremely expanded consciousness.
It's just too much information to fit into a book.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm thinking about, just the amount of information those that care to research right now. It fits the same pattern you already said. You can go to this person, to that person, to this website, to this scholar, to this researcher, and they all have a version of the story. And the only way that, what Claudia and I have been discussing and continuously our understanding is that you have to get out of the right and wrong paradigm.
That's key. Absolutely key.
Right? And you have to have, expanded consciousness is also being able to take in massive amount of information, especially when we're up against AI, it has a quantum computing capability of probabilities.
Yeah, it's more powerful than the human brain in its ability to process information. I shouldn't say human brain, I should say a physical brain.
Brain mass, right.
Exactly.
However, this is why I feel so strongly, and I have for a long time, and meeting you and others has been part of it, is that each of us has has a facet, and each of us has a role here. And it's when we get together that the bigger picture really reveals itself, by not being separated or at each other's throat or trying to prove somebody else is right or wrong.
Exactly. The ways we are the same is what's important, and the goal should be what is most important. Even you can take two researchers who have very divergent information or conclusions. Even within that, you're going to find commonalities. You're going to find things that are the same or that they agree on, so to speak. And from there, you can look at where they disagree as being possibilities, or even kind of looking at it as a facet of the multiverse, and that both could possibly be true, depending on, especially for those of us who are tapping into things more telepathically or more energetically. There's so many potentials out there that it's impossible to say that one is right or wrong, that there's a potential for any of them to be true. And if you take in both both stories, so to speak, or multiple stories, so to speak, and you let your imagination play with them, then at least you're prepared for whatever comes along. It's almost like you may not be using algebra in day-to-day life, but it's a good skill to know how to use, just in case it ever comes up. And that's the way that I would suggest other people kind of approach the different whistleblowers and the different researchers and different people speaking in this field, is as possibilities or potentials, or something that you may eventually run up against.
Right. Well, and also, I guess the other aspect of that is using your own intelligence. Ask yourself some fundamental questions. And, one of the fundamental questions that I ask when I listen to a testimony of somebody else, how does this information help me as a human being on planet Earth, right here, right now, overcome or understand? And, is there a message underneath the words, is what I'm trying to say. Is this somebody, you really need to learn to read the message between the lines and not get hung up in the story.
Yeah.
So all stories that come in that there's some other ET race out there that's here to save us, or is an elaborated story, I have to ask, okay, so what are we supposed to know from that?
What can we take from that is actionable?
Exactly, there, you said it better than me. What can we take from that is actionable? Right? Is it empowering us, or is it making us, sidelining us as the sitting in the bleachers watching?
Yeah, I think one person had referred to a lot of these savior race type stories as being like a stand down program, something that causes people to kind of sit on their hands or put their hands up in the air and be like, everything's going to be okay. It's good to kind of know that and hold that in your heart, that everything is going to be okay. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that there's actions required to make things okay. It's
well, one thing is knowing and another is believing.
Exactly. And that's the kind of connection to imagination and will. Is imagination would be the creation, and the will would be putting it into action and actually creating it as a reality. And that is, again, the difference between knowing and doing. It's, knowing is not enough. We have to apply. Is kind of the step that a lot of people are missing, because they're getting too caught up in, oh, this person said that and that person said that they're wrong, and then this person says this and this person says that they're right. Well, why do you need the Ruiner to tell you whether or not Joe Blow is telling you the truth, or whether or not you should listen to Joe Blow? Why not just listen to Joe Blow and see what you can take from it? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you just wasted 2 hours listening to Joe Blow. Okay, fine. It's better than watching the Kardashians. Right?
Well, I mean, I'll state right here, right now, after the exploration that we've been having this morning prior to right now, is that, if anybody's really addicted to television or keeps the television on, they're mind controlled. I mean, it's just like the energy that comes out of that plasma screen is so contaminated on so many levels that I'm surprised people turn them on.
Yeah, just the technology that makes these new TVs. Like we've got plasma screens, and we've got liquid crystal displays. So, or even the electronic light displaying. One's giving you micro flashes, which cause hypnosis. The other one's made out of crystal, which absorbs your energy, and can also broadcast energy. Like it's a symbiotic relationship. It can give and receive. And then you've got the plasma that just pretty much can do all of the above, right? So right from that technology moving forward into the frequency broadcast, we have solid science that shows us how these things are control mechanisms.
Right and
that doesn't mean that anybody has to completely avoid these things. It's something. It's almost like building up antibodies within the body. It's like you need to get a cold so that your body knows how to fight off a cold. You need to have experienced that so that you can learn how to fight it off. And then once you fought it off, it doesn't mean you have to avoid everyone who's got a cold. You can be in the room with someone who's got a cold, which the same thing is like you can watch the TV, but you're going to be more aware of how your energy is being affected by it, how to build your energy back up and keep yourself healthy while you're in the room with that person with a cold.
Right. So we're talking a lot about energy. And
it's all energy. So.
Right. That's what I would say. In your experience, or how would you phrase it for people to become aware of energy versus it projected reality?
I guess just remembering that it is all energy, that, what we call matter is just energy condensed into a slow vibration. It's, everything is within the hologram, and therefore everything is kind of equal parts. Understanding how we generate energy as a being, through our internal systems, how we generate that and where that energy goes once it's generated, the various ways we can harness it and use it to our advantage, use it to help other people, use it to heal other people, use it to educate and inspire other people. That's our responsibility. And once you kind of get to that point where you're doing that for yourself, then kind of controlling the matrix around you or the hologram around you becomes second nature, because you realize that you are made up of all the same parts, and therefore it works in exactly the same way you do. That's why knowing the self is so important, and you taking that deeper understanding how you're built, like how energy creates everything around you, allows you to apply that magic onto the hologram.
Right. So I would guess that you, from a pretty young age, were aware of how energy works.
Thankfully, because of my own kind of advantage in incarnating and not losing that memory. I knew from day one and was kind of teaching others from day one. I did experience, the same thing we all do, where others come along and tell you that you're wrong and try and beat that out of you or shut that off in you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just the belief in myself that I was able to maintain through that has been my advantage in that way.
Mm.
And I understand that it's an advantage that I had and other people have had, but I also understand how it is very attainable by anybody.
Yeah.
It's, there's nothing special about me. There's nothing special about others that have been able to do this. It's just that that's where they've put their focus. Instead of spinning their focus around in circles trying to figure out what happened between 2001 BC and 2002 BC, it's or even further back.
Right.
Excuse me. Instead of allowing your energy to be spiraled off into these traps, which that's what they are, informational traps.
Right.
That's why the compartments were built in the first place. Because at the end of the day, if we took everything away, if we took the AI away, if we took the Draco away, if we took Archon away, if we took all of that away, there's still a lot of work that humans need to do.
Sure. Well, and who's to say how we would recreate this planet? We
Exactly.
probably from the same patterns that are already embedded in us.
Well, that's just it, is if we took everything away today and just said, okay, go, then all we're going to do is recreate what we already know.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of like the line in the Matrix where Agent Smith is telling Morpheus that the first Matrix that they created was perfect and the human mind rejected it. That's indicative of something that's within humanity that they need to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
That has been there due to trauma prior to Draco control and prior to AI control and prior to any kind of control. That's something that's broken within us that we need to heal. And yes, taking all these external controls away would make that a lot easier and give us the best advantage that we could possibly have to do that work.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have to do that work whether we have that advantage or not. And even with that advantage, it's a lot of work that a lot of people don't seem to be showing a willingness to do.
Right. Yeah, and just to be speaking about work, it's an interesting, just to define the word work, okay, because most of us think of work as the physical work we go out into the world and we do, and we get some sort of compensation for it. So when you use the word work, I would just say you're talking more about the inner work right now.
Yeah,
which
talking about the processing. I mean, if you
right.
if you click something on a computer, it's it'll tell you that it's working, but what it's actually doing is processing and moving files around and clearing out junk data that it doesn't need, acquiring positive affirmational data that it does need, and putting that into place so that it can perform its function.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a kind of a metaphor for the work that we need to do. Put everything in its place so that we can get an overview of ourselves and figure out how we move forward with it, like what we can do to heal the damaged files, whether we need to delete them or whether we can recover them, making those decisions and then kind of reapproaching, refreshing the program.
Which is actually a work. Anybody that's been going through this process of confronting shadows, confronting the real reality of our world, and what it all implicates, you find that the psychic load is quite intense.
Yep. People seem to want an instructional manual written for them, and it's just like going into the compartmentalization. It's the same way. We're compartmentalized within ourselves because the programs were put in place by compartmentalization. They took on that form. So you can look at the, say, Illuminati structure or even just a military structure and use that as kind of a blueprint for the structure that's going on within your own psyche. That's why, we've developed things like astral theology and these different practices, giving images to things and creating metaphors out of these different aspects of the psyche, is because we understand how our mind compartmentalizes things, like the psyche compartmentalizes things. Again, as above, so below, as within, so without.
Right. And yet at a certain point too, I believe the mind is, of course, is an interactive part of ourselves. It's, we have what a lot call the heart mind, but also our mind, because it exists and there is a great mind that exists. We tend to make how we view life, we tend to need concepts for it.
Yeah.
Right. And yet at the same time, it's like not getting stuck in those, or I feel like a lot of, just say, spiritual souls on the planet right now are recalling past teachings, and they're all available for us. But any one system is not the answer either. It just helps us understand something.
Well, that's why all of the different systems were put in place, was because, different strokes for different folks. People can be at different kind of, I don't want to make it sound like it's a progression, although it is, but like different stages in their learning, or they like maybe different stages, but different points of interest within their learning. And therefore we need different teachers and different storytellers to fill in those different pieces. And it's okay. That is okay. It's like the idea of like the different religions. That's a question I get all the time. It's kind of like, is this religion okay to follow? Well, of course, like it's information. Of course it's okay to take in. The responsibility is your processing of it, not whether or not you take it in. It's like the idea that something very, very simple, like if you're Christian, you shouldn't read the Satanic Bible. Well, maybe you should, so that you understand how that side is thinking and how that side is working, and kind of keep it in mind when you're reading your own Bible, so to speak, just using very basic examples. Right.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me. It's all information. We're swimming in a field of information. And really, this is something that in studying AI that Claudia and I came up on, was like, the realization is, like, you can look at the technology and they have what they call programmable matter. They actually have a substance that's a clay substance, and this goes straight back to Sumeria and the creation of humans too. They have it's a clay matter that they can program.
Yeah.
And so, but when you really take it apart, you go, well, all matter is programmable.
Yeah.
So that brings into consciousness that who's programming the matter. And that's where it kind of comes down to, is if we were to take all these control systems off, as you're talking about, which is happening, and we're given over the program, to the programmers, which would be the human consciousness, what are we going to come up with? And that's the imagination. So I was going to ask you earlier, and just because you speak of her and you speak of the wave, I feel, and this is just me understanding, that there's a divine intelligent field that somehow brings together the flows in the right way, that it's doing its own weaving, and we're all part of it. And to tap into that divine intelligent field, I could call it her, or I could call it the wave. And it's directly related to us through our heart, through love, and amplifying that field. I probably said that pretty clumsily, but I would like to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, there is kind of whatever you want to attribute it to, whether it's on a planetary basis, you have your planetary entity, in this case Gaia or Sophia, whatever name you'd like to attribute, who you can, that's kind of one field of consciousness that you can tap into in order to, what I would call, cast your vote or put an intention onto. And we all influence that, like all beings on a planet influence that. But then when you get beyond that, you've got like a solar system as well, and the same process, and then a galaxy as well, and then the same process, and then the universe as a whole, and the same process. So as an example, with this wave, or this frequency change, that is essentially the result of so many conscious beings tapping into that consciousness, casting their vote that this universe needs a balance, that it has tipped kind of off its axis, so to speak, and we need to correct that. And everyone's capable of that. And I think a lot of people kind of get confused too, because they'll have these elaborate visions of different actions that they're taking within the astral realm or within whatever realm you want to call it, and assuming that, you know, I went out and I did this and therefore this has happened. A more accurate way would be to, I went out and did this and therefore I've casted my vote that that's what I want to be done. And because everything is a collective, the votes of everyone are kind of counted, so to speak. And that's why we don't necessarily see like I hammered the nail and the nail went down. I hit the nail and then someone else hit the nail and then someone else hit the nail and eventually it went down. And that's kind of where we're at. And the universal consciousness as a whole does want to achieve that balance. So it's always going to listen to us. But we just, I don't know, we need to kind of focus on that dynamic, the fact that it's kind of I don't know how to say it, like it is a vote. Like I'm going to cast my ballot for what I believe this planet should become or can become, or what I believe that is capable. And we need to do that from our imagination as opposed to what we read on the internet or what everyone's talking about on Facebook or something to that effect.
Well, what I find that's so incredible and beautiful about using the internet right now is that there's so many artists out there, and they're making incredibly beautiful, inspiring visuals for what our planet could be.
Yeah.
And it is based on, the way I've defined it, Gaia, which is the physical matter realm that we live in, and Sophia, which is the wisdom, which is something in us says we've already gone down this road before and we have acquired wisdom. And it's not just, it is the visualization first, but it's also the disconnecting from the control matrix too.
Yep.
Because where we give our energy, where we consciously and subconsciously, but when you wake up to a certain state, you have a consciousness that says, where am I going to give my energy to? What system, what belief, what intelligence? And I suppose that still a large amount of the population is looking for a savior and hasn't yet realized that they're it.
I would say the majority of humans are still looking for a savior.
Yeah, either the savior or the instruction manual, which is the same thing. You know, just more or less someone to do the work or tell them what exactly to do instead of using their imagination to figure it out.
You mentioned trauma, Shane, earlier on, that befell humanity. I think most people don't even know something happened, let alone what happened.
It's true. One thing I kind of came to the stark realization of just a couple days ago was that the root of our trauma, the entire history of that is not available to us in a written form that we can study. It's really not out there. We have versions of it that kind of hint towards what happened, but also give a bunch of incorrect imagery, which affects our imagination. And therefore, when we're trying to recall these memories, our imagination is kind of taking us onto the wrong direction because the imagery that we've been given was incorrect. So that's one of those processes where you kind of have to wipe the slate clean for yourself and start fresh with an open mind. You know, as much as, you know, someone can come along and write it all down on a blog or on a website and say, okay, this is what happened. There's still a aspect of your own imagination that's going to have to be played with in order for you to remember that. Like what I kind of always say is like, don't believe what I say, remember what you know, right? Like use this as an inspiration to recall for yourself, because I'm not right and you're not wrong, and I'm not wrong and you're not right. We both, you know, we have individual experiences. Even when they're shared, you know, we're using the analogy of a car crash again, even two of us witnessing the same thing isn't going to come back with exactly the same story. And understanding that, as simple as it may seem, or even as silly as it may seem, is a key. It's almost like the skeleton key.
It is.
To everything. It's just understanding that there's an underlying reality to everything, but when it comes to information and our ability to pass information back and forth, that's still perception, that's still perspective.
Right. And you know what happens, or my experience with that, and I have been looking at that traumatic event for many, many years. I also find that as I penetrate deeper into the matter of I can go and if I read something, or I read a scripture, or I look at an image, or I can pulled back to Egypt again and again and again, and I have been for many, many years. But every time I go, I find out something deeper, but it's in reference to me.
Yep.
And it's and I know now that I only have my piece. I don't have yours. I don't have Claudia's. I have mine.
Yep.
And it's when we get together and we, like this fractured crystal that was fractured, when we get back together, we're putting these pieces back together so that we can see the story. But certainly if I were to say, oh no, you got that wrong, I mean, I've already tossed out a valuable, valuable piece of the crystal.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you and I could be in the same room with a dozen other people,
Mm-hmm.
and we could all be having conversations, and at the end of the day, like, let's just say you and I are driving home together and we're discussing what we got from the gathering. You talked to people about subjects that I didn't talk to people about, and therefore you got something that I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to people about subjects that you didn't, so I got something you didn't as well. But if you and I then talk and we put those pieces together, then we both got something from that.
Right. Without trying to convince each other that, oh no, you didn't get that right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's not what Akhenaten said. Akhenaten said in the city, not and the city.
I didn't know Akhenaten knew about the city. We knew he knew about sex, so. But I'll tell that story later.
Well, I use that as an example of how silly that kind of way of looking at things is. It's like, it's first of all, I mean, memory is not even perfect. The way that our physical minds work, it's kind of like, I always say, it's, if you picture like a line of test tubes, and those test tubes can hold X amount of liquid. If you bring in new memories or new information, you're going to have to displace some of that other liquid in order to put this new liquid into place, right? So it's almost like making choices of, okay, I can give that up to make room for this, I can give that up to make room for that, but that doesn't mean it's a solid state thing either. It's interchangeable. You can take the Egyptian myths and replace those with Norse mythology, and then once you've kind of explored the Egyptian mythology, you can then go back to the Norse mythology and bring that back into your memory banks and study that again. And what you're taking out of all of that as you're doing it is, again, concepts and ideas, not words and facts. That's the gist of things, or the overview of things. And that's what causes us to fight amongst ourselves. And the compartmentalization was designed to do that. Like the whole Illuminati structure is designed so that when you bring two Illuminati members together from various cults, they're not going to get along. They're not going to see eye to eye. They're not going to agree on everything. Mm-hmm. And what's kind of made them different from the general public in that regard is that they've, their teachers have told them that it's okay to have those differences because you're both working towards the same goal. Mm-hmm. And you can be unified in that goal even with those differences, which is the part of their understanding that we need to understand. We need to understand that even if you take me and someone who has got a completely different idea of the way things work than I do, and you put us together, we can work together to accomplish the goal of freedom for humanity and love for all things, if we can just put aside those different data points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Or if we were looking at the analogy of a computer, as more we do that, like the pieces keep getting shuffled. It's the test tube analogy said in a different way. Whereas when one's not grasping at the truth as if it were something static, and somehow somebody's going to find it and bring it to you, there's a constant movement in that field. There's a stillness and a movement. So like all the in my world anyways, all the pieces are getting shuffled all the time. And every time they shuffle, something new comes out of it.
Exactly.
Those aha moments of like, yeah, and no sooner do you have that than the deck gets shuffled again, right? Or the dominoes on the table get moved around. And that's fluidity. That's another aspect that we long ago lost.
It's kind of like you've got a bookshelf that only holds a certain amount of books, and there's no way for you to like get another bookshelf and put new books on a new bookshelf. So every time you get a new book, you have to kind of make a choice. Well, which book can I give up to make room for this one? But that doesn't mean you've forgotten the story.
Exactly. I didn't really give it up. You
didn't really give it up. You just moved it. All you did was put it over there for a while. And like I say this when I talk about taking in information, it's not that I read something, I think, okay, that guy's out to lunch and I'm not going to listen to it. It's just, this doesn't make sense to me right now, so I'm going to put it over here. And maybe one day something else will come along that will make that make sense to me, and then I could reach over there and grab it again and come back and look at it again.
Just listen to a very beautiful man, scientist, say exactly that he said he was one of the few scientists that actually does that. If he discovered something, he keeps it in his notes, even if it doesn't fit with this theory. He says, like most science, if it doesn't fit with their theory, they just throw it out.
Exactly. That's science and psychology have kind of taught us to do that. To totally discard things that aren't working right now. We're growing and we're evolving and we're flowing beings, so that doesn't make any sense if you're pretty much driving yourself to stagnation by doing that. And stagnation is that's evil.
It's a living death.
Exactly. Whatever keeps us from flowing, that's what I consider to be evil.
Right. And it doesn't lie outside. I mean, that fundamental choice that we all, we do have. We could talk about free will, but that's a deeper, but we always have choice. And to get out of fear, so I was going to bring that up too, back to the trauma. Is that the bottom of all of this? Is it fear? Yes.
It's it's a duality fear too, because we're afraid of what we don't know, but we're also afraid of what we do know. We're afraid of what we think but aren't sure of, and that kind of causes a lot of problems for us because we're constantly running around in circles and not spiraling. Fear is that's the choice is pretty simple between love and fear. Like that's all we really have. All the other emotions that we have named and kind of characterized are all derived from those two main emotions. And if we can learn how to create a harmony between those emotions as opposed to allowing one to take over the other, which fear likes to do, then we can constantly move forward without holding ourselves back.
Well, it's like choosing love, but don't deny fear.
Exactly.
Because most of us are conditioned to either one was mostly suppress fear because we don't want to look at it. So people have made a massive amount of structures within their lives and framed themselves into elaborate boxes that all look very pretty, but they're all being built out of fear.
Yeah, that's a lot of kind of mistakes are made in like looking at good and bad and kind of thinking to yourself, I need to eliminate all of the bad, because there's certain aspects of what we would consider to be bad or evil that are teaching us something. I think of I think it was Mark Passio that I heard talking about the ego, and how when people are saying that I need to completely be devoid of an ego, it doesn't even really make sense, because the ego is the only thing that's telling me that I'm different than the tree. And if I don't know that I'm different than the tree, when the branch falls, I'm not going to move out of the way, and that branch is going to crush me. Whereas if I keep a healthy ego in place, I'm going to understand that if that branch falls on me, it's going to crush me, and I should get out of the way.
Well, I mean, what is ego? Identity.
Exactly.
ID. I identify myself. The real trick is, what do you identify yourself with?
Exactly.
Right?
And it's You having control over your ego and not the other way around.
The little ego, the traumatized ego that has to make big everything drama. So we won't forget that it exists. Once you accepted that you have ego and that it's actually you as spirit can identify with that, it changes everything, really. But
yeah,
that other ego can be very temperamental.
It can be. It can be.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a balancing act. It's all a dance. It's all a great big cosmic dance. That's what it is.
Yeah.
People want to make it something solid. It's not something solid. It's a flow. And
exactly.
sometimes you've got to change the flow.
Yeah. I know you have chosen not to share the traumas of your life because you don't want people to focus on it, and yet the whole thing of trauma is and the things that we fear the most that we're living within the midst of can be our greatest teachers.
Exactly. I went through that trauma, but I've processed that trauma. So sharing that with you could work to inspire you to work on your own trauma, and I respect that. But for the majority of people who are not looking at information in that way, it can create a lot of fear, a lot of anger, and a lot of negative emotion that we don't need more of right now.
Exactly. And yet what can you said to us the other day when we were chatting, because I asked you a question, and I know it's a question that plays around since you're being listened to by quite a few people, is what part of you, or why did you choose to start speaking out? And you said, well, it was a place. What did you say? It was a space on the bookshelf, and somebody had to fill it.
It goes back to what we said earlier about how different people have different pieces of the story. There's a space on the shelf that needs to be filled, and someone's going to fill it. And if nobody does step up to fill it within their own truth and within their own responsibility, then someone else is going to come along, let's say a dark entity is going to come along and fill that spot for us. So we might as well have the courage of our conviction to stand up and fill those spots when they present themselves. Which
is, really a way of saying to anybody listening that, and anybody gets into critical, mind-chasing games, that it's only because they haven't stood up and filled that space themselves.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that anybody, no matter what trauma they think they're under, or what control mechanisms that they are part of, it's within them to stand out of it.
Yep. It's a responsibility thing. I mean, I could look at things that happened to me and victimize myself, or I could realize the fact of the matter is I survived it, and it made me a better person, and it helped me grow, and it created this flow that is within me that wants to see things change. If I hadn't been through those things, I might not have that desire to change. I might be
absolutely
totally content to rest on my laurels, so to speak, and just kind of sit on my hands and watch TV and drink some beer and
and be bored.
And be bored. Yeah, exactly. And then once the boredom kicks in, I'm going to start pointing fingers at other people for that, because I don't realize how my own actions put myself into that place.
So I was going to ask you that in your inner self. I know a lot has happened to you, and I don't mean just in this lifetime. Do you see in some way that all of that is part of your own creation?
I think that at the highest level of my being, it has to be.
Okay.
It doesn't make any sense that as a creator, I would create something that didn't benefit the whole.
That is, that's profound.
Yeah.
I really do believe that. You should say that again.
Yes, please do. You've answered about 1 million questions I didn't know I had with that.
What did I just say?
I'll say it. You said that as a creator, I can't think that I would have chosen anything that wasn't the benefit for the whole.
Exactly. Just maybe it's a belief system, but I can't accept that I would put myself in a situation for no reason, or that I'm a victim to the situation that I've been in.
Mm-hmm.
It has to have been a choice. I am a creator, and I know that. I know that I create my reality. I know that I help co-create the reality. We all do. It's not that I'm unique or special. It's a power we all have. We're all creators.
Mm-hmm.
We all kind of look at, whatever race that created this race or created that race as being creators, but that's not it. This is the universe as a whole is being created by all of us, them and us. Whether, humans were genetically manipulated by Draco, they're still not our creators.
Mm-hmm.
We're the creators of them and ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the whole story, really, no matter whether it's biblical, Sumerian, Babylonian, whatever you want to say, we were created in the image and the likeness of God. I mean, just taking it on that level. But most people don't really understand what that means, because that means we are the creators ourselves.
It means we're just as powerful as God. It's the same thing,
Exactly.
People didn't listen to Jesus say, where everything I can do here, you can do as well.
Or more. And you will do more.
And you will do more. Exactly.
So,
that's telling us something. That's telling us that there's no real divide between us and them. Mm-hmm. We're all making choices, and we're all creating this reality. And, again, maybe that's a belief system too, but it must have a purpose, or else why is it happening? It's, something there has to be a cause, or there wouldn't be an effect.
What I decided when I was really struggling was I didn't have anything to lose by stepping into that. Whether it started out as a belief or not, it was like you said, I cast my vote.
Yep.
I said, okay, I'm in. Now let's see what happens, right?
Exactly.
The beauty is that when you actually cast in that direction, right? I guess I'm getting biblical here. We cast our nets, right? You cast yourself in that direction. Then what starts coming back to you is, I don't even know the words. It sort of defies the ability of the English language right now. Borders on the miraculous, but not in a firework way, in this most profound way of just awe at what creation really is.
Yep. I mean, we've got lots of teachings that kind of tell us that, going back to the path of the fool, that's more or less what you described of stepping into that role or stepping into that belief. That is taking that leap of faith, as we call it, and starting off on the path of the fool, where you're walking towards the cliff, but you're not seeing the edge of the cliff yet. You're just walking. It's like using Jesus again. He made a big point out of kind of the heart of the child and playing and having that kind of childlike mentality where everything's new and everything's being discovered, and I haven't solidified everything yet, and I'm exploring things and I'm imagining things and I'm doing all these things that children do that we beat out of them by putting them in the public school system. That's that is the creator in us, is that child like consciousness where everything's new, everything's wonderful, everything's beautiful, everything's a lot of fun. And when we come across something that's not so much fun, we're going to change it. We're not just going to cry about it and fall down and become a victim to it. We're going to take an action in order to see it resolved and see it transmutated into something that is part of the creation, that is part of the beauty and the magic of the universe.
It's actually a huge challenge. A challenge is what makes us grow.
Yeah. I hear all the time that the struggles today become your powers tomorrow. And I understand that as being part of the physical or the universe, part of the universe as a whole. I mean, everything we observe within nature shows us this process of some people call it like life and decay, or death and renewal, or death and rebirth, something to that effect, where we're taking the aspects that aren't useful anymore and we're letting them go to make room for aspects that are useful and that can help us create something different or something new. And I mean, there's a ebb and flow to it all, where, you know, just like as a soul, individual soul, you know, talking incarnationally, we've all kind of been the good guy and the bad guy. We've all kind of been right and wrong. We've all kind of been light and dark, because you need to know both sides in order to create something.
Absolutely.
And
there's a line in Prometheus where they say sometimes in order to create, you must first destroy. And that doesn't mean, you know, going off and killing a bunch of people and cleansing the earth in order to make things. That's more talking about breaking down programs within yourself so that you can create a new one.
Well, that's going to bring me back. And it's so interesting that you make reference to the movie Prometheus, because no matter what I'm studying right now, and I've really dived deep into my research, and it's revisiting a lot of themes and coming back to them again and seeing them on a deeper level. That movie comes up again and again and again. I mean, it's been, and it is truly, I'm understanding more and more of it. Not that I've gone back to watch the movie, but that was going to bring the conversation back to AI and how it's represented in that movie, and what I'm started to dig deeper into the Sumerian texts and the cylinder cells and looking at it, you know, not with an idea that it's going to give me all the answers, but looking at it from what am I seeing here? What is this telling me? Me, you know, I'm not going to write a book about it, but, you know, that there was AI. There is a growing, there's a growing body of evidence that they first created the AI. The synthetic life was here already then.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
Well, it's not a very popular thing for me to say, but my own kind of education, I guess, or what I've kind of taken through everything that I've learned, is that organic creation, what we call source, has this parallel inorganic source kind of running along with it. You know, it's I don't want to say that it's equal to organic source, but it's parallel to organic source. And that's where AI comes from. And that's why I say that, like, one AI created more AI and more AI and more AI, and influenced us on how to create AI systems so that it could infiltrate those systems and make it a part of the whole AI, is because if you trace it all the way back, just as the organic part of the universe has source, the inorganic part of the universe has source. And that's what I call the source AI.
Yeah, so it's important we talk about it.
And it's not, you know, people are looking at this as like good and evil. It's not a matter of good or evil. It's organic and inorganic. And even saying organic is a little bit of a mistake, because this is all a hologram. So in a way, none of it is really organic. But we can call it an organic hologram because it's a natural process, or something that's kind of being created out of pure energy, as opposed to something that's being generated by something else. So that's the only difference. It's like the difference between like a natural chemical and a synthetic chemical, one that was created in a lab and one that naturally occurs due to biological processes.
And yet they're so closely allied. I mean, there's something that you're saying is triggering something in me right now.
It's a dance. They're dancing partners. They're not enemies.
Exactly.
Right.
They realize that the two sources, organic source and inorganic source, realize that by working together, they're creating the flow that is the whole universe.
Like it's almost, when you're saying that, that's what I'm getting, is it's like, it has to be that way.
Exactly. We've already figured it out with light and dark, good and evil. It's just expanding that into something bigger than the concepts that we already have. Right. And it is the same concept at the end of the day, that it is something, it's a mechanism that causes movement. It causes growth. It generates energy and momentum, and therefore is required. And the only kind of responsibility that we have, it's not to completely destroy the inorganic. It's about finding the balance so that the hologram can be stable.
Well, if we were to take it, what I'm feeling, and what I've explored also in my own, is that it's the mimicker and the replicator. So whatever is coming forward in this organic, we can call it consciousness, it's being replicated out there almost so we can see it. I mean,
Exactly.
Okay, so we don't have an outside enemy.
No, we don't. we have a dance that we need to understand the dynamics of and learn how to participate in
responsibly.
Exactly.
Well, a dance is a response, right? Something
Exactly.
moves and something else moves, right?
Exactly. And I mean, like, a lot of the time people say that one partner in the dance is leading, but that's misleading in and of itself, because it still requires the other person to move their feet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a give and a take going on within a dance. It's not one leading the other like completely. I think the only kind of hiccup that we run into is trying to discern what the purpose of it is. It feels like most people can't hear, well, the purpose is growth, the purpose is development, without knowing what the end goal for that is. But let's just imagine for a second that nobody knows what that end goal is. And that is what the goal is to create something that is completely unique to what Source understands.
Yeah.
Right? To use Prometheus again, you know, they're going to meet what they believe were their creators. And, you know, the AI android asks the human, well, what do you expect them to say? It's like, well, I was kind of hoping to find out why they made us. Well, why did you make me? Well, because we could. And how disappointed would you be if your creator told you the same thing? Well, personally, I wouldn't be disappointed. I wouldn't be disappointed to hear that Source created me because it could. You know, like that is enough for me.
Exactly.
Right. And what can we say? Your purpose is the one you make it to be.
Exactly. That gives all the responsibility and all of the power back to me. Instead of me giving it away to someone else, my creator, I'm taking it all within myself and being responsible for it myself, and directing my own actions in order to be integral to the responsibility and purpose that I have put forth for myself. Because once again, I am a creator. I am an aspect of Source. Therefore, I am Source. Therefore, I am a creator. And everyone can say the same thing.
Beautifully put.
Absolutely fantastic. It's wonderful to hear that and to actually be able to say that. And this is the one thing that I feel so many people stop them, even if they're verging right now on a large waking consciousness, to be able to actually say that.
We're scared of our ego, and I mean,
yeah. Well, we have reason to be, and
we have reason to be. Yes, it's run rampant, and we're trying to reel it back, and that's why, you know. But we also have to realize not to put it on a cross either. You know, it's not something that we need to crucify, so to speak.
Right.
It's something that we need to pacify, and while it's pacified, we need to understand it.
It all comes back to that trauma point, though. I mean, that is the baseline of the runaway ego in a lot of ways. And what I've observed is that fear, that trauma, that, oh my God, something outside of me is going to do something so horrible and I have no control of it. Therefore, I have to make all these structures so I feel safe, is really right in there in that mix.
Exactly.
And psychologists call it our inner child, you know. That beautiful child, that beautiful creative child that we all are, has been so traumatized. It's our duty as consciousness to bring that child back to life.
Yep.
And we're going to take care of that child now. And that for me goes out to every child on the planet, every life form.
Give the child a chance to grow up.
Yeah. Okay, we just took a little break, and so are you up for answering a few questions?
Sure.
Okay. Are there women today on our planet who are descendants of the bloodline of the Orion Queens?
Yes. There's a kind of two kind of lines that have come from it because of, like with any bloodlines, these things get messed up. You know, people fall in love with people that aren't part of the bloodline. It happens. So stuff like that happens. So, but the simple answer would be yes. And there's one kind of aspect even within the Illuminati that traces that bloodline, so to speak, and have beliefs based on what they think that bloodline means. Same can be said for pretty much any bloodline. So much time has passed and so much mutation has happened that the genetic bloodline, so to speak, doesn't really have the effect that it used to. These systems were put in place by beings who don't recognize the power of the soul over genetics.
Right.
And so the idea of bloodlines and maintaining things through bloodlines is inherently flawed, and it's taken a really, really, really stupid long time for a lot of other beings to realize that.
Some are a bit slow on the uptake.
Right.
Due to all of my contacts and experiences with various races, I can kind of almost draw a line down the center of the universe between beings who understand what I just said, that the DNA or genetics is malleable or augmented by the soul and spirit.
Yeah.
Like we can look at phantom DNA experiment and see that is true, that there's something energetic or a frequency that is holding the genetics in place. It's not the biology, mom and dad were both of the same bloodline and therefore it's passed on that way. That only happens to a certain extent. The soul can change all of that. But there is that 50% of the universe who doesn't recognize that. The way that we've been presented that just kind of came in recently with that movie Jupiter Ascending, where they were talking about, instead of reincarnation, they were calling it a reoccurrence, where all of the genetics matched again, or a reoccurrence of the same genetic line. Bloodlines and that ideology behind maintaining bloodlines comes from that part of the universe that believes that the genetics are what are controlling our behavior. We have research on this planet now that shows that is incorrect. Like Dr. Bruce Lipton is a great example with the biology of belief or perception, where you can take the same cells and just change the environment and they will become different substances. The same is true for living beings. So when we start talking about reptilian DNA mixed with human DNA and how they're trying to hybridize us in order to make us whatever, that only works to a certain extent, because whatever operating system you put onto the computer is going to determine the functionality of the computer. So if a soul incarnates into a body that's genetics aren't suited for the body, that soul has an opportunity to adjust the genetics so that it is suited for it. And that's where the kind of flaw behind all of that line of thinking is something that I've observed. And I could probably go on about that for a while, but going back to the Orion thing, that's, again, those beings had come here and they believed that. They believed that the genetics are everything. And therefore they established that bloodline in order to maintain that presence on this planet. And it just never works out for them.
So within that, trying to understand the whole aspect of programmable matter or potentialities that are locked into the human the genetic structure, isn't it up to us what we turn on and we turn off through consciousness?
Exactly.
Right. And don't we all have like massive amount of genetics from, I don't even, from Orion, from Sirius, from the Pleiadians, from Amadron, all of those seem to have mixed into the human DNA.
Well, that's exactly it. And when people kind of look at humans as being special or unique, that's where that idea comes from, is because we have a very kind of, it's almost like having something where you have the ability to turn on and turn off anything you want, whereas other races are kind of limited to their own race or their own switches. Like they've only got a limited amount of switches that they can turn on and off. As much as a lot of us were from creation a lot of those switches for us were from creation turned off to begin with, that doesn't mean we can't turn them back on. It doesn't mean that we need ascension to turn them back on. It doesn't mean that we need X-rays to come down and turn them back on for us. It means that we need to consciously turn them back on for ourselves. It's all still there. It's not junk. It's just not being used. I have lots of apps on my phone I don't ever use, but they're still there. If I did choose to use them, I could, right? So,
if you chose.
Exactly.
This is stepping, sideways a little bit, but it's a really direct question and a good one. How can we use our imaginations to offset those rituals that were performed? This is to the blood moon last night, and the energy of trauma into the ley lines of the earth. So I guess the question is, how do we, through imagination, heal those ley lines, those energy transfer points?
Well, the first thing that needs to be known is that they don't have more power than we do. And there's a lot more of us than there are of them. Going back to unity, we need to be unified in this intention. We need to be unified in this vote casting. And the only way that I guess the trick to doing that would be to put aside the differences again and focus on the commonalities and be willing to work together despite our differences. In terms of just that particular set of rituals, instead of kind of looking at it as something that, we need to organize a group and we need to do this and we need to do exactly this, just, having the confidence in ourselves and in each other that we're all going to do that work. It's all going to go to the same place. All that energy is going to flow against the energy that they are putting forward. And there's more of us and we're just as powerful. So therefore, the balance should be tipped to our favor, not to theirs. I think the major difference is that, there was a lot of people who on a night like last night were just, I guess it was a Sunday night, so that may not be quite as accurate, who were just at the bar, partying or whatever. They weren't focused on anything like this. And so I think that the only thing holding us back is just a lot of people not being aware of it. But I don't think that's something that stops us either. The whole point of having conviction is not caring whether or not something will work, doing it anyways.
And the power of imagination, it's real. Just to add a little bit to that, because the way Claudia and I met was a group of women mostly, that we allowed our imaginations free play, and we supported each other in that. And on one level, what is shamanic journeying? It's allowing your imagination to go into a space. And I just like to say to people, if you're getting something back, then trust it. Just trust it. So many people think that that's all child's play, to use that word again, and it has no reality. But the whole unseen realm, the 96% of everything that we don't see, is a real reality. And the key to getting into it was trusting my inner workings and my inner imaginary capability. And it's like, for me, it's like the image comes through my imagination, because that's the unfettered part of me. That's the part they can't control. They can't control it.
I understand that, validation and affirmation from others is helpful. But we need to lose the idea that we need it.
Sure.
Like if what you've experienced and what you've seen through your imagination doesn't necessarily line up with what I saw. Like, let's just say, give the example of a guided meditation or a group meditation, where your vision is different than mine. Instead of me looking at that as mine is right and yours is wrong, or yours is right and mine is wrong, or how come I'm visualizing these things and nobody else is, and therefore I must be wrong. Having the courage of your own conviction that what you're doing is right irrespective of what other people are doing.
That-
I always just kind of say, like, you know, you need to start walking and you can't worry about who's walking with you. And yes, I understand that that can get lonely, but that's part of the leap of faith. That's part of the trust of yourself, is knowing that eventually somewhere along that path you are going to bump into other people who are walking the path as well.
Mm-hmm. And I thank you for clarifying that, because that was really what happened within those group sessions, that nobody led them. We just allowed using the Gaian intelligence morphogenic field as our guide, and we all saw something different. All of us did.
Yeah.
And yet what we realized, because that's the realization, was that by doing that in that manner, changes were really happening. And because none of us said, oh, wait, no, I saw it that way. No, I saw it that way. No, we supported each other in that. And you're absolutely right, though. I want to underline that to know yourself well enough to know that all alone you're doing that.
Yeah.
But it does help. It does help for people that are just breaking out of the shell to experience that with others, and to get the confirmation that somehow, some way, my gosh, we put our pictures together and we really saw something.
Yeah. And that's helpful and healthy as well.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need, it's not a requirement. It's not, you don't necessarily need a group. It'll help you, but it's not a requirement.
No, do it with your friends. I mean, it's not even about going out and finding a group. It's like, start doing it.
Yeah.
Just start imagining. Sit down with your neighbor, sit down with your daughter, sit down with your whoever, right?
Yeah, I have mentioned before that I was, made to be present at a lot of different rituals, and it wasn't so that I could learn how each ritual worked systematically. It was so that I could understand that all the ritual is doing is making it real. It's taking imagination, and the ritual cements it into the mind so that the mind can create it and project it as reality.
Wow.
Which is the same thing that we're doing when we have those type of sessions, and using our imagination in those ways is, first of all, imagining something, creating something new, and then making that real for our minds through whatever our ritual practice is, whether that ends up being discussing it with someone else, or even getting some type of affirmation from someone else that they saw the same thing or experienced the same thing, or at least can understand what you're saying. That is a ritual. That is what's creating it or making it real for the mind, and allowing us to project it into reality. So
a lot of people would ask, and where their fear comes in is, how do I know that I'm doing the right thing? I think that stops a lot of people, that fear thing again, that trauma.
That's just, that's when we talk about having faith. It's not faith in a creator. It's not faith in others. It's faith in ourselves. I use the word conviction all the time, because that's what it is having the conviction, the trust, and the belief in yourself that you're not worried about that. You can let go of that fear. There's no easy fix for that. It's something that everyone needs to develop for themselves. I think that just not enough emphasis is put onto it. A lot of people spread fear through these things, like, oh, well, if you do this, you're going to have this result. Well, maybe not. Like, just you and I both doing the same thing doesn't mean we're going to have exactly the same result. No. We're individuals, and we affect our environment uniquely, and therefore you doing one meditation, like one style of meditation, let's say, may work for you, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for me. I may need to adopt a different style, which is why we have different teachings, and why we have different styles, and why we have different cultures, and that's so that everyone can kind of find where they belong and what works best for them. And understand that you can even move between styles and move between systems. And a lot of people are kind of identifying now that everything is programming. And that's true. We're all programmed. The thing that we can do, though, is we can program ourselves, or we can reprogram ourselves. We don't need to have outside influences do the programming. We can achieve it for ourselves.
Well, I would go myself far enough, and I would ask you if you would agree or not. Like, actually staying away from ritual and guided meditations. I mean, I see a lot out there of guided meditations and type of ritual things that have all been co-opted. There's energies that are behind them running it, and they're just scooping up that imaginary quality and using it. And often it's not for something that we would call particularly beneficial. A lot of times there's a big ego behind it.
It's true. And I do agree with that. I wouldn't, at the same time, I wouldn't tell someone, like if someone came to me and said, hey, I'm going to try this meditation, I wouldn't tell them no. And I would say, well, I might let them know of the potential for that energy, and just like, reiterating to be aware of where they're allowing that energy to flow, because it might not be flowing to where they want it to be. It's kind of like following the money, follow the energy. But at the same time, I think that the trial and error process, we need to give each other the freedom to go through that.
Right.
We need to, especially amongst friends, instead of getting, we're all kind of protective, we're all kind of defensive of each other, and that's great. That's an endearing quality. But, kind of like being a parent and understanding tough love, you need to know where to draw that line. To say, okay, that person needs to experience this so that they can learn what I've learned. Right?
Exactly. I would agree with you wholeheartedly there. And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to do with a friend or somebody that you love very much.
Very much so.
Come to the realization that their journey is taking them somewhere. Maybe you've already been and you know the pitfalls, but they're going to have a unique way of finding their way out of that.
And that's the key, is you've already been there because nobody stopped you from going there, and that's how you learned it. So,
Right. Yeah.
What are you doing to somebody by stopping them from having the same experience that helped you grow, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't
No, it's just really helping give people tools, thoughts, keys, so that as they're going through these experiences, which it isn't, it's just, for me, one of the primary aspects is to not lose yourself, to always have that observer there, that presence in some way. Know that that's the immortal part of yourself that is always there.
That's where
and
the kind of pitfalls from guided meditations really do exist, is that someone else is steering your imagination. Right? Whereas in a group meditation where everyone's on their own, you are completely in control of your own imagination. No one else is stepping you through it. No one else is giving you imagery. No one else is giving you concepts. You're creating these things. You're imagining these things for yourself. And therefore they're going to be decidedly unique to everyone else in the group. And that is how we're going to find change, because we need to create something different. We can't recreate the same. We need to imagine something completely out of the box.
Hey, I agree wholeheartedly.
And if we're always guiding the meditations, then we're not giving people the freedom to discover those things.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. In your daily life, this is my own question. I'm looking at all these things on these notes, and I'm like, I think we covered a lot of it. How do you balance being in a human form with human daily problems and life challenges with being in expanded consciousness?
I kind of just separate them. Like I use the Clark Kent Superman kind of metaphor. My daily life is Clark Kent, and everything else is Superman, and that's okay for me. I personally have. I know some people struggle with it, but I don't have a problem with kind of having those two faces, so to speak. I don't see, like, neither one of them are being dishonest, so I don't see it as a bad thing, right? Like as long as I'm behaving honestly, regardless of the mask that I'm wearing, right? At least my energy and my intention are still being controlled by myself. So that's kind of it. It's just like I can be very accepting of things because of my experiences. I've learned this, and because of everything else we've been talking about understanding that differences are going to exist, and that they're okay, because that's where the unique aspects of imagination come from, right? So in order to come up with something new, I mean, I'm not going to be able to do it all with my imagination. I'm going to need yours as well, and yours, and other people who may be listening. It's going to require all of our imaginations, not just mine. So
right.
that's how I kind of process it. And like even understanding that getting frustrated about it or allowing it, it's not to say that I don't get frustrated about it. It doesn't make me sad, and I don't get depressed sometimes, because I do, like everyone does. It just means that recognizing that you are there, you are feeling that way, what you can do to get yourself out of it is completely dependent on you, what works best for you. And I think that being able to walk in both worlds is kind of what allows me to have that conviction in a way as well, because I see both sides of things. Instead of trying to separate myself from one or the other, I'm constantly engaged in both.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, there you go.
I personally see that as more healthy. Like it's more.
Right. So really, it's in being engaged.
Yes.
I mean, because there's a tendency in the way things are explained to people is like disengage, right? Like that higher consciousness disengages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you create this bubble realm that's all yours. And, I think that's a lot of the traps, perhaps, of some of the paths that take people to a really higher state of consciousness, and yet they're disengaged.
Exactly. And then you become stagnant again.
Right. Exactly. You finally get to that place. So like maintaining awareness and engage no matter what it is. I mean, if it's in your life in some way, there's something for you to engage with, right? Whether it's a problem or being grouchy one day.
Yeah.
For
okay,
me,
like people kind of look at like, becoming enlightened as meaning like, well, now I'm perfect.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen. You
I
can't expect that to happen.
No, I mean, I love Van Morrison's song, what is enlightenment? We're still chopping wood and carrying water.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And if we weren't, that's not enlightenment to me. There's a quality to that.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've got all these massive amount of like just jotting down thoughts and notes from the last several weeks, and it wasn't directly for Shane, but the one that my eyes are falling on right now, Shane. I don't know if you want to talk about it at all, but it's come up in quite a few conscious people that I know, and it comes up again and again until we really figure it out. Is the Ark of the Covenant?
It's a title.
Mm-hmm.
It's a title that's been given to more than one thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Different cycles of this planet have had different Ark of the Covenant. Essentially, it's a dual purpose technology, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
One aspect of it is healing, one aspect of it is destroying, and that's why it's often called a creational technology. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, about sometimes in order to create something new, you have to make room by taking out what was old. So I think the most recent, I'm personally confused as to what the most recent Ark of the Covenant actually is. And it makes it hard for me to kind of discuss that particular subject, because my best guess or best conclusion so far is that it is essentially a weapon that was given to a specific group at one time. And because we don't understand well enough how to use it, it's more or less been quarantined from us and is being held by people away from, everybody. It's like one of those technologies that's so black that nobody gets to use it.
Right. Okay. So it could be black or white, right? Though, because you said it's got a creation.
Exactly.
So I'm just, because you said that, I just happened to listen to Harold Kautzvela's talk about the Ark of the Covenant. It's also been in my life in my consciousness for many, many years. And then we could just, at least, like you said, we're trying to cross-weave different streams of energy to points that could agree, which there's more than one. It's dangerous because of misuse.
Yeah.
And so even the, let's call them what do you call these? The Illuminati. I don't like that name anymore. It's just so outdone.
I was just going to start calling it the structure from now on. That's kind of...
Okay. So the structure, the current structure, okay. They even don't really want, they don't even want to try to use it because it's not understood completely.
Exactly.
Does it have a consciousness of its own?
It seems like it does.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So But I feel, because when a large group of people start bringing something forward, does it have something to do with Pandora's box?
And that's more or less another name for it.
Yeah, okay.
It's like, yeah, it's the same concept, yeah.
Okay. I won't go any further, because then I'm going to be asking questions about mythologies. But I feel that this is something we as awakening humankind, or awakening consciousness, will soon pretty much figure out what's going on here.
I agree. It's a stage, I think, that we'll get to eventually.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Today is a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shane.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate your honesty and your courage to speak from your heart.
Yeah, I'm kind of long over. I'm sensitive to what I say to people, but I'm not ever worried about what I say to people.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter to me what people think of me. It just doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I'm worried about is what I say to them will make them think about themselves. So when I'm holding back, that's generally it. Like as an example, talking about like ritual abuse and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I hold back from it. It's not that, I'm trying to hide anything from anybody. I just, like we were talking, that's a spot on the shelf that someone else can fill.
Right.
And has been filled ad nauseum at this point. So.
Exactly. And it's out there, Now, the real choice right now for anybody listening is, what is any individual going to do about that? Because it's not isolated.
No.
I mean, it's not isolated, and it's happening to somebody right now.
Yep.
And yet people will not come up to that and look at it, stare in the face. So we'll keep talking about it, and there'll be others talking about it until enough people wake up to it and realize that this is something that we don't need any longer.
And that's another thing too, is like a big part, I've said this other places as well, is a big part of why a lot of the like child sacrifice and that dark aspect of things is coming to light right now, is because we're talking about programs that are no longer in use. Mm-hmm. These were loose generating programs that aren't being used on this planet anymore. Therefore, they're allowed to break down, and the only thing that's perpetuating them at this point is people who are programmed to do it, not breaking that program yet. It's going to take time. It's going to take, this is where we need to kind of wait out a couple generations before, like I saw it in my life. I've been growing up when I was a kid, parents were a lot more abusive with kids than they are today. Right. And this is something that has just been slowly coming out of the consciousness, like the mass consciousness is this program to, abuse your child. And that's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
Right.
And this is where allowing a couple generations to pass is what makes these things real. That's the ritual that makes the imagination real. So we're going to see over the rest of our lifetime on this planet, we're going to see that aspect of what's been going on in our world come to light. And it's going to be really dark. Another reason why I don't feel the need to talk too much about it is because all of that stuff is going to come to light, and we are going to be healing that particular aspect, because it's not being utilized. It's not part of the structure anymore.
Phenomenal, and yet still a lot to work to do.
Exactly. It's one of those things I say, but I'm always kind of measuring my tone when I say it, because I don't want to make it sound like all the abuse is going to end. No, I don't want it to come across like that. Like, even with the Draco leaving, the Draco are leaving, we're free. Like, I don't want it to come across as that. They're leaving, but is kind of where I'm at, Right.
Well, you said it already, and how can we say it enough, or any of us? I say it to myself every day. I say it to myself all the time. Okay, so what now? What are we going to, what now? What are we going to create now? And I invite anybody to start using their imagination and thinking outside of it. And it's so astounding to me that some of the most bright people on this planet can't do that. They literally cannot break out of the structure and use their imagination for something else.
It's true. That's why I had brought that thought experiment forward of the what if to begin with, was just to make people kind of put themselves in that place now of what happens once it's all gone. What happens once, we're not doing these things anymore? What happens once we don't have these control anymore? Goes back to what I started off this conversation with. What happens when we run out of enemies and the only place left to point the finger is ourselves? Are we ready for that? I mean, we've got a lot of fire under our asses to go at the Illuminati or whatever you want to call them. But do we have the same fire to change those things within ourselves?
Right. Or we'll just recreate them all over again. I mean, you cannot change something by using the same tactics in which it was created. It's just...
Exactly.
One doesn't even have
that's
to...
my beef with like white hat groups. Like that's
Right.
You're playing the same game. You're doing all the same things. You just think you're doing it for a better reason.
Right.
But they think they're doing it for a better reason too.
Right. Well, let's say step outside of the game. The only way for this game to end is to step outside of it.
Yeah. Stop playing.
Something new.
Stop playing. Yeah. Well, a new playing field is being made right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
The
window is open. That's the way I want to say it, is because like it's not my choice and it's not your choice.
No.
It's our choice.
Right.
And we could be the minority in the end.
Right.
And that's okay. That's okay too. Right? Like I don't want that, obviously, but it's okay if that's the truth.
Right.
If that, right?
Well,
we're going to come around. We're going to go through another cycle. We're going to get back to another point just like this one. We're going to have the choice all over again. And that's the way the universe works. And it's okay that it works that way because time isn't as linear as we perceive it anyways. And, what seems like a long time, a 2,000, 3,000 year cycle seems like a long time. In the grand scheme of things, it's not. You just blinked an eye, right? So bring yourself out of the perceptions that we're privy to now and realize that there's more to it than all of that. And just do your best.
Right. And everyone that does, we're building a bridge.
Exactly.
We're building a bridge, and that's how I see it. And I need to keep that in my mind. But we're also building ships, in a way. And
well, exactly. Like there's always other options as well, right? Like one question I get all the time is like, what happens then? Like, what happens if the full physical matrix goes into effect on this planet and we are living in that movie? What happens then? What happens to all the souls? Well, the souls make choices just like they always have. Nothing really changes. There's lots of other planets and there's lots of other versions of this game going on in other places too, which is something we need to keep in mind. I often get questioned like, how can you be hopeful when this, and this are happening? Well, because this, and this are also happening. Like there's, I can look at the aspects of nature that aren't under the control system, so to speak. Like, let's just say animals. I know that they are to some extent, but I mean like more on an energetic conscious level, it's not the same type of control. And this is why you can have cats and dogs play together and dogs and like magpies play together. And, I was watching a video of a lion licking a mouse today, like cleaning the mouse because it was muddy. Like, like that is true nature. Watching that video, being given a stick and being put in front of a Spider-Man pinata and told to beat the pinata to break the candy out of it, and he won't do it. He puts down the stick and he gives Spider-Man a hug. That is nature.
Right.
That is what human nature really is once you strip away all of this crap. That's where my hope comes from.
Right. And see, all that's out there now. But see that, and that's what everybody's sharing. All the people that don't really know that there's a dark cabal, new world order, I still see the explosion of people sharing those stories. Yeah. Right. And the animal kingdom is teaching us. I mean, I'm so astounded. I mean, I look at those things and, I grew up in a time when nobody saw stuff like that. We were like the king of the jungle and, the strong, the fittest, we never saw images like that.
Yeah, for sure.
No, ever. So, the fact that that's out there and that's moving the human spirit is greatly beautiful to watch.
Yeah, and that brings up another point actually that I make to people all the time is that, when I say like the details aren't all that important, and even like, the idea of like full disclosure is not necessary
No.
is because of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's because once all of that energy matrix is out of place, then we do, resort to our nature. And our nature is that.
Mm-hmm.
Our nature is not what it appears to be, what we call human nature, and being violent to each other and all of these other things. That's not human nature. That's conditioned behavior.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Human nature is that kid putting the stick down and giving Spider-Man a hug. That's human nature.
Mm-hmm.
That's it is. And that's why I know that it will be okay.
And that's a one point of imagination. And I say that also, and I, thank you for saying that so beautifully, because every time somebody says that's human nature, I say, no, that's the lie. That isn't human nature. Why do you believe that's human nature? That we're
Exactly.
mean and greedy and, it's just like, I take it apart. And when more people see that that's not the case, and they find inside themselves that that's not the case. And
Many of us may be conditioned to do that, but that doesn't
Right.
mean we can't condition ourselves to do something different.
It is certainly not our nature. It's not nature. And I was going to say, isn't that really disclosure?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the only part of disclosure we really need, is to understand that this is not our nature. And we should just understand that using common sense, but common sense is a superpower now. So,
Right. I know, it's like, and then if you are in your human nature, real nature, when you look at a tree and you watch the branches go up and you see the sky, and then your mind goes to the stars and you start imagining all potentiality. Get away from the TVs. Or even if you're looking at a television or the internet. I find actually the electronical means of filling me right now, I find so much beauty on a screen in front of me in my desk. And I can also go out and hug a tree, but the beauty is beauty, loving beauty.
And that's what when it comes to generating energy, that's how we do it. Like people, we identify it as being love, but it's recognizing and witnessing beauty.
Yes. Oh, I just want to end it right there. So beautiful.
Because you're all beautiful, so just recognize that.
Thank you.
Thank you.